the work that we've planned have been based off that. So, for example, looking at lack of finance, we've got the living wage jobs in the cafe, but we also partner up to provide work placements as well. So we've got staff members who are ex-big issue vendors, and also have some placements lined up for people who are in homeless shelters. Lack of nutrition knowledge, we're starting a free community nutrition workshops, which were supposed to start in March, but obviously they got delayed. Lack of access to affordable healthy food, that's something that's been ongoing. We've done the free community meals, and we've now got a community fridge in Gutays, and we're looking at setting up a community food co-op as well. Yes, that's a little bit about us. Obviously then during the pandemic, we completely changed. The cafe had to close. We'd just had a community dinner like the week before lockdown. So we were able to do one pretty soon before that, but the last one we did was in March. Then when the cafe was closed, we launched our emergency food project, which was basically all staff members who volunteered their time. And we cooked up 3 meals a day for 6 days of the week. And then as the project went on, we then changed to food parcels from doing the meals. And now the cafe's reopened, so we're back doing that. We're back for our community meals. First one's at the end of this month, and we've now got the community fridge reopened as well.
Great, thanks. And finally, we go on to Caris Kettledy, who is one of the directors of the National Food Service Bristol, which has had a baptism of fire in the COVID crisis. After 6 months of building and growing, they were about to launch their first social eating project when the lockdown began. And within 2 weeks, they'd launched one of the largest food distribution services in the city of Bristol. It's a testament to how well they've worked when they've got time to commit to meaningful things. So over to you, Caris.
Thank you. Yeah, so just some information on kind of where we were before lockdown. So my friend Louise worked with the National Food Service in Sheffield. She worked in food hall. I finally convinced her to move down to Bristol in September. And she came down and she just immediately started just contacting anyone who she could think of who was involved in some form of food justice organization or like food network or anything like that. So she started doing that at the beginning of September. Then we just did a few small scale events. We started catering at a few things, like a few kind of political events. I think probably our biggest one was catering for 100 people at the end of Bristol Transformed Festival. That was a week before lockdown as well. So just started doing that, and then we were just starting to think about setting up National Food Service in Bristol. And Louise has written a little time frame for me, and it's just like nice, like lots of coffees, ran a few meetings, blah blah blah, and then the next thing is like all caps locks, ran an emergency food delivery service for thousands of people, and that really kind of captures just how it's been over the last few months. So yeah, we had a couple of public meetings discussing how we were going to set the project out, really trying to go in with the kind of National Food Service model of kind of I suppose horizontalism and community engagement, and also being led, having everyone have a chance to lead it, very user-led. So kind of building those structures, and then lockdown happened, and me and Louise and Pete, the 3 founders of National Food Service Bristol, sat down and we were like, yeah, okay, we're going to need to feed some people now. People aren't going to have access to food. So we started small scale. We had like a tiny kitchen in a youth club, and we were cooking out there. We were cooking, I don't know, a couple of 100 meals a week, and then demand was just increasing and increasing, and we thankfully got another kitchen, a much bigger kitchen in Lockleys Sports Centre, where we could kind of take it on professionally. So I became the kitchen manager for Lockleys Food, the Lockleys Sports Centre food project. Louise is the project manager, and Pete was really helping us with the kind of like data and logistics. Like he made some amazing graphs. He was like really good at getting all that data and like processing it, which was really helpful for like grant applications and stuff like that. We could show that because we don't means test, obviously as a point of principle, we're a solidarity organisation, not a charity, so we don't means test. But some of the kind of bigger funders wanted evidence that that the food was going to the right people. So it was really handy to have Pete's sort of like graphs and like data to show that where the food was going in the city was the areas of high levels of deprivation. And he also made this amazing driver map allocation system where basically you would be able to plot all of the deliveries that were needed for that day on a map, and you'd be able to see the drivers that were closest to them, because although obviously we couldn't do proper community engagement in the way that social eating is, we still wanted to try to make the drivers be delivering to their local area and still have some sort of like connection to, you know, I'm delivering to my neighbors sort of thing. So that's how we did that. We've sent out well over 30,000 meals now. We were cooking 7 days a week. I was in 7 days a week, Monday to Sunday, cooking hundreds of meals every day. We then froze them, and then we package. Each person gets 3 meals a day. They get a load of pudding, and they get like a loaf of bread and like any extras that we have. So yeah, we've sent out 30,000 of those now. Yeah, and then the last part of that is where we're going in the future, isn't it? Yeah, so what we're trying to do now is more social eating. So obviously it's become massively unsustainable, which I know we're going to cover later when Ina sort of asks us those questions. But broadly, very unsustainable project. We can't keep going like this. So what we're doing now is scaling down. We're going to be doing social eating events twice a week in Lockley Sports Centre. They're very keen to continue a relationship with us. And basically kind of any food that's left over, we'll deliberately cook too much food for the amount of people who will come, and then with that we'll freeze it and give it to some people who absolutely do need the delivery service still after. And yeah, just encouraging and supporting more social eating projects across the city to start up.
Yeah, it's amazing work what all three of you lot are doing. And you touched upon it there. I think we should talk a little bit about adapting the models of the organisations, adapting how you work to provide during a pandemic, during a crisis. So if you could talk a little bit about this transition, or for you, Beth, like, and I guess for you, Karis, like completely emerging during this time on such a big scale. And then, yeah, maybe lead on to that second point that you made about transitioning out of that into a more sustainable model. Like, what are the things that you think are important to consider? How have your thought processes gone about this? So those two things really, adapting to the crisis and then following on out from this. Does anyone particularly want to start with that? Karis, while you're here, let's go.
Yeah, so in some ways we were kind of luckier than organisations such as Food Hall, who were already very well established, because they had a very tricky situation in that they had a lot of people who kind of relied on them already, and a lot of people who used Food Hall as kind of a space where they could kind of be, and space where they could be safe, and a space where they could find community. So they had obviously a really tricky time where they had to consider, how are we going to move towards this emergency food project without kind of letting people kind of fall through the cracks, and how do we make sure that they're supported? On the other hand, we didn't have a venue. There were 3 of us to begin with. I've never managed a kitchen before, and it was so quick, and we had to build up so fast. And yeah, so it was really tricky. I mean, we found the volunteers very easily. Like you were saying earlier, if people had more time, people will use it for good. So we didn't find much difficulty finding the volunteers, but then we had to create all the volunteer management processes from scratch, which was a lot. The volunteer management processes, the kitchen management processes, the organizational processes, how we communicate with each other, all of these things were completely just kind of like we were making them up as we were going along, as we were sending out thousands of meals a week. So it was really draining. I had a week off last week, and I kind of realized we'd all sort of been in emergency mode for the past 4 months, and that takes a toll on your mental health, to be constantly in crisis management mode for 4 or 5 months at a time. So it was a real challenge to kind of create all these things and then to sort of sustain them. You were worried about your volunteers, you were worried about the people you were giving food to, you were worried that you were going to run out of money, you were worried about everything all the time. So yeah, that has been the problem then. So in terms of kind of going forward, yeah, it's not sustainable. So me, Pete and Louise were working full-time on this for free, mostly for 2 months. Then we got funding, so we got paid for a couple months. But obviously now we can't work full-time for free indefinitely. Our funding's run out. The sports centre's reopening, so they need to use the kitchen more. Drivers are going back to work, chefs are going back to work, all of that. So we need to kind of scale down. Our scale down project kind of timeline is looking like by the beginning of September, we won't take any more new referrals. So we'll just be giving food to people we've already given food to. And then we're going to, over the next 2 months, month and a half, try to find alternatives for people who use our system. So kind of food clubs, so supper clubs around their area, whether they can get more support from the council, whether they can get more support from like big existing charities that have more access to funding, that sort of thing. And obviously that won't be everyone, there will still be a handful of people. So yeah, like I said, by the end of September, we're hoping to have about 20 to 30 people kind of on our books who we give food to each week after social eating.
Not an easy task. Beth, we'll come to you.
Yeah, I might lead on from there just because a lot of what Karis articulated is quite a similar experience for us. Also, Bristol and Sheffield have been a massive help to us with setting up. They were Bristol were sort of maybe, I'm gonna guess 3 weeks ahead of us, but I'm not sure. But that meant some really brilliant chats with Louise, sharing of resources. They really helped with writing the proposal and understanding sort of ways we could potentially do it. Sharing training, talks. Louise helped a lot when we set up our hotline, which also came from Sheffield. And that system has amazingly evolved. So it got to the point where we'd all sort of have a check-in, and we were all doing something different, even though it sort of come from the same idea and the same software. But so when you set something up in a pandemic, it's not, and I think Karis touched upon this as well, it's not something that's community led. It's led by the people that have the privilege to have the time and the energy to invest in supporting other people in their community that don't have that. And that's not something I personally advocate for, or anyone, or is something that is in our ethic. It is solidarity, it is mutuality, it's not charity. So and a big thing for about solidarity is over charity is that it's consent based. With you have to be asked to support someone. So that's what I really think I really value our hotline for, because it people self-refer and they come to us and they tell us exactly what they want, what they didn't like our hotline volunteers are incredible, and they spend hours on the phone to people, chatting about all sorts. And we've had some amazing experiences where people have made us their chili sauce or made a cake and sent it back with our delivery drivers to thank our volunteers. And they've even addressed it to certain volunteers just because that they had such a great chat with that person, which also sort of feeds into the fact that relationships are forming even in a time when we couldn't be around one another. there are benefits to setting up in a pandemic. One of them is that all of the norms are suspended. I've been working in this area and trying to create social change and open up spaces and just sort of shake the system a bit for a long time, and I've just always come up against people saying no, and all of a sudden that there's been a lot of yeses, thankfully, and people have donated money, their time. There's been lots of conversations that just were so difficult to be had before, and so much, mutual aid groups that popped up out of nowhere. There's just so much collaboration happening right now. So yeah, moving sort of, I guess, potentially going back to the solidarity, where's my mind going? So shifting to becoming more sustainable. We now need to take some time to reflect. I'm calling it to compost. We need to sort of take the stuff that we've learned, take all the stuff that's sort of died, it didn't work, we tried it, we abandoned it a week later, and that was something that was really great for me to personally learn. The proposal I wrote at the start lasted maybe 3 weeks before it was like torn to shreds by all of our volunteers, and they were like, no, this works way better, let's do something else. And now it's just a completely different beast to what it was then. And going forward, we've started surveying with our customers. We've started doing more feedback work with our volunteers. We've arranged some sort of workshops, and we are, it went from being sort of a couple of people saying, yeah, this could work, let's do it, to being a solid team of sort of, 10 people that are really, really working on all the organising, all of that sort of in the meetings all the time, really steering it. And we just need to, the thing that we're doing is talking to community kitchens about setting up, helping them set up their own pay as you feel cafes, and then having a central point where we do home delivery, because something that's really important to us is that we give people as much autonomy over how they consume and store and have food as possible. So social eating spaces play such a huge role in our society, and we're such an advocate for bringing that back and doing more of it and creating more spaces. But also, I'm really keen for people to have their cupboards well stocked and their fridges, and not feel fearful about going to the shops or not be able to. So we're going to continue our home delivery for as long as possible, whilst doing, actually, again, a similar thing to Carrots. We'll be doing, people can come to the community kitchens and get food, pay as you feel, taking inspiration from Lauren and the amazing work they're doing, but then just continuing this infrastructure that we've built up, and amazing people with tech skills have developed over the last few months.
Very interesting to hear like the differences between them, but so many similarities between organizations that work on such different scales and in different locations, that I guess it shows the strength of a network, that you can share these practices, like see before you implement something, like what works well, what might work well in one community, and just like trial different things together whilst like having that support network together, which is cool. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think we came from like completely different positions. So we had a cafe with a commercial kitchen. Like, it's a very tiny commercial kitchen, but it's got commercial oven and commercial pans, and like lots of trained chefs and lots of staff members. So we did have 2 sites. So we had enough staff for 2 cafes, all who were furloughed and wanted to get involved and volunteer their time. So at Many, it was basically an existing team of people who are used to working together, used to working in that space, know each other really well, and there's already like that dynamic that we work together. So we didn't have too many issues with that, which was really, really good. So our main focus was looking on how we're going to get the food, how we're going to source it, how we're going to distribute it. So it then meant that existing staff members then took on a volunteer role. So we had drivers, we had people who were collecting food, people who were prepping food, people who were delivering, people who were cooking, people who were boxing up, people who were labelling, because putting allergen labels on every single meal takes a very long time. So that was like one person's role. actually a few people's roles. So yeah, it just meant that existing staff members were then just taking on different roles. So it worked really well. I think, yeah, being an existing group of people, it meant that it ran quite well. And then I think for us, like coming out of that, it sort of was very much led on what the people wanted. So the people we were delivering to, we found that more people were like, oh, I would rather get ingredients now than meals. We delivered to quite a lot of families, and at first people, they had the option of having meals cooked or ingredients to make their own meals, and at the beginning everyone chose meals pretty much, and then as time went on, people were asking for ingredients and they didn't want the meals so much. So we found that maybe about a month or two in, yeah, probably about 6 weeks, people were then changing over to ingredients, and then maybe another month after that, then we were finding we were dropping off to people and they just weren't at home. So like they all lived quite local to where the cafe was based, so a few volunteers were quite happy to just go back and deliver. If I was delivering, I tend to just drop it on their doorstep if they weren't there. But then you sort of worry that what if like you're not going to get it, or you know, all of that stuff. But if you don't have the time to drop it back, you want to ensure that it's going to be there for them. So after a few weeks of doing home deliveries, we then changed it to be a collection service. And during this time, majority of the people that we were delivering to were big issue vendors. I think the same week that we launched the collection was the same week that big issue vendors were able to sell again. So they were able to earn income, but also meant they were out and about, going to their pitches, going to the magazines. So it fitted quite well within that as well. And then we did that for a few weeks, and then the amount of people who were actually coming to collect was just falling, and people were communicating with us that they didn't want to collect. So I think in the last week we had about 6 massive like food parcels for families just completely wasted, which was then I then reopened the community fridge to distribute that food into the fridge. So now the way that people can access food is from a community fridge, which is in the Putays Community Centre, which is where one of our cafes is based. Yeah, so it's very much now on people's terms. If they need to access food, they know that it's here. We ensure that food is always fully stocked. We ensure people know that it's there. Yeah, so it's sort of changed from being that emergency response and now putting it on to people like the food is here. If you need it, you can come get it. So and it's not been us forcing that change, it's been very much following the lead of, oh, people aren't coming to collect anymore, or people want ingredients, so we've always tried to follow what they want.
Yeah, I think it's clear that although you are 3 different organisations, like the community is very much the centre of what all of you guys are providing, which I guess is a key tenet of what the NFS is trying to achieve throughout their network. So although you are 3 different organisations at different stages, or not even although, probably more so, do you have any tips or advice for learning from your own experiences for people who would want to start getting involved with community organising, especially in the food justice realm, people who are thinking of starting maybe a community dinner or anything on the spectrum?
I would say like my biggest tip would be to collaborate with people. So it might be that there's projects in your city or in your area which are similar, maybe not completely the same, but you can link in. So for example, if you're doing a community dinner, maybe you can link in with a food growing project, or yeah, like for example with us, we collaborated with the project that was doing the free school meals, and that's how we did our first community dinner. So I think just definitely seeing what's around. You don't really want to be mirroring what people are already doing. You want to ensure that there is that need there, and if you can then work together to further that need, further make sure you're delivering that, then that works really well. The same with the community fridge. We weren't involved with that. We're in a community centre now, and the community fridge is at the centre. So I got in touch with them, and now we're in charge of the operations of that fridge, and we do the community dinners in collaboration with each other. So I think just looking at the existing projects, getting involved with them, and then together it means you've got more people, so you can then go further with it. So me and the guys behind the fridge, and now applying for funding so that we can get some staff involved that will be paid roles, which means that we can do more with it. And we're looking at opening a food co-op as well, which if I was trying to do that on my own, I just wouldn't have the time to do the grant applications or anything. Like, just that on its own takes a very long time. So collaboration to basically, when you've got shared goals, just seeing those people who are out there.
Love that. Karis?
Yeah, kind of following on that, networking I think is a really important thing. Like, on the left we don't really talk about networking enough, but if you go to, like, you know, big businesses, they know that it's about who you know, and they know you've got to put the time into, like, making relationships. So yeah, talk to as many people as you can. Anyone, like, whether you think they'll be relevant or not, if someone wants to talk to you, just, like, do it. And then it might be a waste of time, they might be really good. But on the other hand, like, do try to find out where the kind of, like, do a power map and find who the local leaders are, and find out who the people who hold sway and the people whose opinions are respected in communities and groups. So try to kind of, like, seek out those people and ask for their advice, and see how you can support them as well. So I'm just looking at Louisa's notes here as well. Another thing I'd say is, like, so kind of going back to what Beth was saying before about how it kind of created a dichotomy of, like, the people who had time and energy to kind of volunteer and the people who didn't. In Bristol, there obviously was a lot of that, and particularly people who were leading, there was a lot of that, but actually, like, a lot of people who used our service were also our volunteers. So I'd say, like, don't presume that you're just, like, going into a community and kind of doing on to people. Like, people do want to join and people do want to make better things for their community. So don't kind of presume that, like, those people won't be engaged, because they will be. Be prepared to adapt your model. So obviously you'll go into a space, you'll have an idea of what you want to create. That might not be where it ends up, like Beth has found out. You know, and like Lauren said, she adapted all of her kind of processes. So yeah, don't be afraid to adapt and give up control sometimes. Like, sometimes there'll be people who know better than you, and sometimes that's really hard to accept. So yeah, don't do that. And then yeah, kind of on that as well, find out what works for each community. So find out, is there actually a need in this community for this project? If there is a need for this project, what other things could we be doing on food justice? I find in Bristol, a lot of the time, there's a lot of food justice organisations that are concentrated in the BS5 postcode, where there is a lot of need. But then on the kind of outskirts of Bristol in particular, and particularly Bristol South, there's just as much need, if not more, but they're not very well served at all by food justice organisations. So don't just be concentrated in one area of the city, kind of look to where you're needed. That's it.
Thanks, Karis. And Beth?
Definitely second everything just said, and it's really nice to hear how those learning points have come out. Another one for me is documenting the process, both in terms of impact, but also people come through, they've got loads of energy, loads of skills, loads of ways to make this project better, and get that down on paper so that other people can take the baton, because it also helps with our own burnout. It was amazing to step back sort of a month in and just have a week off and be so supported by everyone around me. And then I think that was the turning point when it became a really collaborative organisation, and everyone knew how to do everything, and all of that was being shared. So yeah, lots of how-to guides, and lots of different people. Yeah, exactly. Karis has said, keeping all your minutes, sharing them, just making sure that anyone that has the energy to come and get involved can access that stuff. And it's hard. It takes a lot of energy just doing that part. And we're certainly better at it some weeks than we are others. And feeding on from that is self-care. the weeks that I've remembered to do one of the things that I love to do that is not associated with the food service have been good. Have been good weeks. This week's a good week. I've been swimming. That was nice. I mean, it's pretty impossible not to swim in when you live on a boat and it's this hot. And then another one that's really I'm really passionate about is like not forgetting to celebrate. And some ways that we do that is we have this lovely, we use Slack to communicate. We have a stories channel, and anyone can feed in and say an experience that they had. And often it ends up being sort of like a passing of notes. So one of my favorite ones is that a hotline person took an order from someone that said it's their birthday the next day or coming up, and they wrote that on the card for the order. And then the chef heard about this, so the chef was like, wow, we just have so many surplus mangoes, I've just made a mango cake, I haven't cut it up yet and portioned it out, give them the whole mango cake. So this mango cake goes to this wonderful person who then is in tears and just ringing up the phone line a number of times, so thankful, sharing stories about how they shared it with their grandchildren, how they had a little gathering, and that sort of came all the way around and just touched everyone in the organisation. And that was those personal moments, like the guy that brought in the chili sauce, like that's what keeps us going and connect with one another. And I hope we can celebrate more when we're able to gather more. That would be really nice, get together in person, because also getting to know so many people virtually is so strange. As I'm sure many of us here have had that experience. It goes against our nature.
Thanks, Beth, and everyone. I think they are really useful nuggets of knowledge to take away. We've got a couple of questions in the chat. We've got like 15 minutes now for Q&A, so I guess like if we can keep it kind of short in the responses, but obviously address them how we can. And so anyone that's got a question, please put it in the chat or let me know that you want to ask it and I can unmute you. So the first one is, what prior skills and experience did you have? Cooking hundreds of meals is a big job. Beth, do you want to start?
My background comes from more sort of community organising. Opening up. A year prior, opened up an empty warehouse and did some really exciting hyperlocal, sort of built a community centre out of nothing. That was really fun. Prior to that, I've done all sorts. I'm very much a like try it, go for it person. I studied in a completely different field to where I work now. I work in nature connection with families, so that's really helped, given a lot of the stuff that the work I've done for this project is the sort of badly creating a system that then someone else came and created much better than me, but just getting that ball rolling and connecting those people and having those conversations. So I was really well placed, having done a lot of work in the local community. I'm not in the kitchen.
Yeah, so I have worked in very small scale cafe kitchens making soups, sandwiches and frittatas. I love cooking, so when I've done all the catering as well for like 60 to 100 people. But yeah, I was not prepared, basically, is the answer. I thankfully had a lot of really great chefs who helped me. And what was the exact question? Sorry. What prior skills and experience? Yeah, I don't know. I just sort of muddled through and it worked out. I had a load of chefs who were really great and really helpful. But yeah, it was just kind of making up processes and systems sort of on the fly, which sometimes was very stressful, but has pretty much worked out. And I'm just going to answer the next question because it's relevant to that, which was about those using professional kitchens would have relevant paperwork and certifications. Yeah, so we only had people we only accepted chefs who had food hygiene level 2 certificates, just so we could like because you can work and serve food without, but we just did not want to take any risks. Like, it just was a bit too much for us. So yeah, everyone who worked with us had food hygiene level 2. Louise registered us with the food hygiene, the food standards for Bristol City Council. And yeah, we made a 100-page document on our food hygiene processes that they haven't looked at yet.
But it's there for when they ask for it. Lauren?
Yeah, I actually used to volunteer at Food Cycle in Hackney when I was in uni, so I used to volunteer there, which was kind of similar to the style that we were cooking during this project. And then when I graduated uni, I worked at the Big Issue for a few years, so I was an outreach worker, so my background's actually more community-based work. And when I opened a cafe, I didn't really have much experience working in a cafe, except from like part-time jobs. Yeah, so I think my background for the business is definitely community-focused work, which makes sense that we're going in this direction. But yeah, I think when we're cooking, one of the chefs was like, I love cooking on this scale because food doesn't even become food anymore. It's just like giant vats of shredded carrots or giant potatoes. It's just not food. It's like, I don't know, working in construction or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, a whole range of backgrounds, but we'll come together to do such good things. Sorry, I've lost where the next questions are. So has anyone taken, this is from David Smith, who's no longer in the meeting, but I'll ask the question anyway. Has anyone taken advantage of the Co-op Group's fair share offer for local stores? No.
Oh, as in, do we get waste food from Co-op? Is that the question?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, we do. I don't know.
Yeah, we get our fair share, so fair share go as well.
What was that? Sorry, Lauren.
We get our food from Fairshare, so we're a member of Fairshare, and they've got Fairshare Go, which you can get free food from supermarkets. Whereas if you go to Fairshare, you've got to pay your membership fee.
Great, thank you. So we've got another question asking, do you link with Unite the Union and the community sector? Karis, do you want to talk on this?
Yeah, so in Bristol, we're very, very keen to kind of build up our links with unions. So that's a lot of work that Pete in particular has been putting in, but it's where we're kind of could be going in the future. So we Unite, you give us some money. I'm not going to say how much because I've forgotten, but Unite give us some money every month. National Education Union in Bristol and South Gloucester have both given us a one-off donation. We're starting to link more with the Bakers and Allied Food Workers Union. And yeah, we're very keen to get more and more involved with the unions, because obviously that's where our politics lie. But yeah, Unite the Union, we're very keen to get more involved with them as well.
Do either of the other two have anything to add on that? We can move on if not.
No, we don't actually work with any unions, but it would be, yeah, from what you're saying, it would be quite interesting for us to have a little look at that, I think.
The power of communication, the power of conversation. And we have another question that referenced last webinars when we heard from various large-scale community food justice projects, and they were talking about sustainable funding. So this is a question asking how these projects will be funded in the future. Beth, should we start with you?
Yeah, we can. The business plan is not yet drawn up, so I can give you some ideas. We're looking at doing a solidarity meal scheme, which would involve sort of solidarity meal prices from cafes, and then cafes donating meals to us. So customers supporting their cafe to make meals that we then redistribute. We've applied for lots of funding. We're waiting on quite a lot right now, which would definitely determine what's going to happen in the next 6 months. That's obviously not the most sustainable way, and something that I see that Kieran mentions about the politics of it. Yeah, it's applying for funding, competing for funding just doesn't make any sense. So what will be the funding we have gone for has been in partnership, and what we'll be looking at doing in the future is that there's been quite a few things about who gets funded, and making sure that we're redistributing and sort of helping to make the funding system a little bit fairer. So working with organisations that aren't so well placed to get access to funding, and that sort of thing. And then pay as you feel will help, but probably won't be enough. So we're definitely looking at our current cash flow. Need to get creative with getting some money in.
Lauren, Karis?
So for us, it's a mixture really. So we've done crowdfunders which funded the last 4 months project. We actually had quite a few large donations from that. So quite a few businesses thought what we were doing, and they actually donated a percentage of their profits to our fund, along with like lots of large donations from different organisations as well. So we do have a bit of an excess from that, so we've kept that in our like impact pot fund, and then the majority then comes from the cafe sales. So it's like a percentage of all the sales that we make at the cafe goes to fund our projects. So the two main sources, also a few external grants as well, that we, like you're saying, mainly in collaboration that we've applied for those. So either with the community centre, with the community fridge. We're a member of a Cardiff Food Network group as well. So whenever there's funding opportunities, it's always a way of seeing how we can sort of apply for that as a group, as opposed to, like you said, competing. So there are main sources of funding. Yeah, I think I've covered more. I think with the pay what you can, actually what you're saying, I think if you actually promote that, if those who can afford it pay more, that then covers those who can't afford it, you do see people paying a lot of money for a really simple dish. So we've had people pay £20 for soup because they want to then pass that on. So I think we do try and encourage that sharing of wealth as well through the pay what you can afford.
I think that's really interesting and good to hear. Yeah, exactly. Great tip. So Karis, if you'd like to add to that, and then yeah, let's go with that.
Sure. Yeah, so obviously we're very worried about funding, always have been, how we're going to continue this, how it's going to be sustainable going forward. We have applied for National Lottery grant to pay wages for myself, Louise and Pete for 6 months. We might get that, we might not. That will really affect how it's going to look going forward. But you're right, we don't like writing grant applications. They're long and they're boring, and you have to kind of like suck up to people with money, which is not kind of where we're at. We don't want to kind of change our vision to be more in line with other people with money. So we are trialing a kind of union style subs membership, where people pay a monthly amount, and then we need to like exactly figure out how that works out, but it basically means they can come to our events and not have to put anything in the pot if they don't want to. Their kind of contribution to the organisation covers the food if they ever go to a social eating event. I think we have about £200 a month coming in from that model at the moment, which is great, and that's how we want to grow. There are large concerns with it. Louise in particular is concerned that it will kind of create a kind of dichotomy of the rich people who are able to afford membership subs versus the people who actually come and eat the food. I think that is a concern, but I think that's a concern that we need to address by making the people eat together rather than not having the money, and also creating more of a sliding scale of what people can afford to contribute. Because once you contribute to something, it's like with union subs, it's yours, it's part of your organization, you have the control and the power to shape it, and I think that's something we should be encouraging. So yeah, that's how we're going to try it, and obviously pay what you can. So
Yeah, it sounds like you're having really productive, interesting conversations that aren't always easy to solve, you know, not a clear answer. And that is the end of the webinar, unfortunately. Thank you so much to our 3 speakers today. And if you don't already know, we've got another webinar next week, which is hearing from 3 leading food justice academics or food security academics, talking about why there's a need for a national food service, using their research to support that. And then the following Thursday at 7 p.m. again, we've got a webinar discussing the future of the food system and where the National Food Service fits in with that, looking at how we can close the food loop, talking with different community partners to expand, to collaborate basically, and fortify what the National Food Service is. So again, join our Facebook page, our website to find those events, and hopefully we'll see you there. But thanks for coming.